My name is Ryan Field. I'm a senior optical systems engineer here at Starfish Medical, and I'm going to talk today about what to consider when choosing a camera for a medical device. Cameras are one of the most common optical components in medical devices. They can be used to image structures in the body, investigate samples from a patient, or provide guidance for a surgical or diagnostic instrument. Camera sensors are almost always going to be an off-the-shelf component because most medical device companies don't have the specialized manufacturing required to make them. And these sensors can either come as bare sensors, for which custom electronics need to be implemented, or as integrated camera modules. To choose a sensor, we need to think about what specifications we require. So one of those is going to be what spectral range we're looking at, meaning are we looking at light in the X-ray range or in the visible or in the infrared range? If we're looking at something like X-rays or light in the mid-infrared range, we're going to need a kind of specialized camera sensor for that, where most common camera sensors use either CMOS or CCD sensors, which are sensitive in the visible range or a little less commonly in the near-infrared range. We also need to ask if we're going to need a color image or if we just need a monochrome image. Color cameras typically use a periodic array of color filters called the Bayer filter, along with a mathematical process called debayering in order to generate the color image. And those types of color cameras are usually going to be what we need if you're trying to get a color image. But when you don't need a color image, it's actually usually better to use a monochromatic sensor because they have a little bit better sensitivity since there's no light lost to the color filter. And also, since they don't need to go through the debayering process, that actually gives them a little bit better effective resolution for a given number of pixels on the sensor. When we're thinking about resolution, we have to basically pick a camera resolution that's going to enable us to have all the relevant details and the image be clear. And we also have to consider the specifics of how the image is going to be displayed to the end user. So for example, there's not a lot of point in taking a super high resolution 8K image if ultimately that's just going to be displayed on a 3-inch 640 by 480 pixel display. We also need to consider what frame rate we need for the camera. So one example where we might need a fairly high frame rate is if we're using the camera for real-time surgical feedback, because the frame rate is going to set a lower limit on the amount of lag between when a surgeon does something and when that's actually displayed on a display. On the other hand, if we're using the camera for still images, then the frame rate's going to be a lot less important. There's a temptation when picking a camera sensor to just pick the one with the best raw specs, but this can just drive up cost and potentially even require higher specs on other parts of the device if we actually want to take advantage of those specs. So the best approach really is to choose a camera that meets the requirements, but doesn't spend additional money on just specifications that don't actually lead to better effectiveness for the device. If you'd like to read more about choosing cameras for medical devices, you can read my blog on starfishmedical.com.